the South Pole, the last place on Earth to be reached by human beings. During the Antarctic summer, temperatures range between -20 to almost -70 degrees centigrade. In 1911, two nations endeavored to be the first to raise their flag at the South Pole. The leader of the British team, Captain Robert F. Scott of the Royal Navy. The leader of the Norwegian team, Arctic explorer Roald Amundsen, also yearned to lay his eyes on the last untouched place on Earth.
Our plan is one and again one alone, to reach the pole.
Roald Amundsen, leader of the Norwegian expedition.
I feel it is good to be setting forth to upholding the exploring traditions of our race. I don't hold that anyone but an Englishman should get to the South Pole.
Captain Robert Scott, leader of the British expedition. When both teams arrived in Antarctica, they quickly made base camps. They set up supply depots in preparation for the smaller teams who would travel the final route to the pole the next summer. At the British camp, Scott maintained a strict formality. Scott sat at the head of the table. The hut was divided by a partition of packing cases. On one side were the officers and gentlemen, on the other, the seamen and workers. The gentlemen played football and held lectures on all kinds of subjects. At Amundsen's camp, everybody lived together in an informal atmosphere. There was an all-pervading sense of urgency and focus. The Norwegian plan was to utilize 100 sled dogs, and the men practiced dog sledding and skiing incessantly.
The English have loudly and openly told the world that dogs are unusable in these regions. We will see.
Amundsen assigned Olav Bjaaland to make the sleds lighter. He cut the weight down from 50 kilograms to 35. Amundsen felt that speed would lessen exposure to the harsh conditions and help him win. When the long winter night lifted, he was ready for the leap to the pole. The British still had more preparations to make.
A host of things have had to be left to the last moment, and now it becomes a rush to get them done in the time.
Scott felt dogs were unruly. He elected to use the man-hauling system.
In my mind, no journey ever made with dogs can approach the height of that fine conception which is realized when a party of men go forth to face hardships, dangers, and difficulties with their own unaided efforts.
Each man was expected to pull 200 pounds of supplies for hundreds of miles on skis.
Hauling the sledges was the most back-breaking work I've ever come up against. The starting was worse than pulling, as it required from 10 to 15 desperate jerks on the harness to move the sledge at all. I've never pulled so hard, or so nearly crushed me inside into my backbone by the everlasting jerking with all my strength on the canvas band round my unfortunate tummy.
On our fourth day out, we hit a fog so thick we could not see our hands in front of our faces.
In the fog, Amundsen had to travel blind, using only a compass and sledge meter. He had prepared for this by assigning one of his men the task of making sure the meters were absolutely reliable in polar conditions.
In the fog, we reached 80 degrees south, a brilliant test of both sledge meter and compass.
Amundsen's goals required his team to race only 5 to 6 hours a day, after which his men would eat, sleep, and get out of the elements. The Norwegian team did grumble about their monotonous Eskimo diet. Amundsen raised the team's defense against scurvy with brown bread, berries, and undercooked seal meat. During bad weather, Scott's instruments froze up, and he was forced to stop every few hours to check his position. His track zigzagged back and forth with each course correction, wasting precious miles. The British team was kept racing all day. They wouldn't stop unless there was visible distress.
After 9 or 10 hours, Scott would say, "I think we'll go on a little bit more." It might be an hour or more before we halted and made our camp.
Then a 4-day blizzard hit, and kept Scott's team pinned down in their tents.
It is more than our share of ill fortune. How great may be the element of luck. No foresight, no procedure could have prepared us for this state of affairs.
The blizzards forced Scott's team to eat food that was set aside for the return trip. Amundsen had been sure to prepare for worst-case weather and the prospect of getting trapped for some time.
Victory awaits him who has everything in order. Luck, people call it. Defeat is certain for him who has neglected to take necessary precautions in time. Adventure is just bad planning.
At one point, Amundsen noticed that Sverre Hassel began to withdraw from the group. Worried about keeping the team unified, Amundsen took great care to share Hassel's camp chores with him. Hassel opened up to Amundsen that he'd been feeling critical of him. Soon thereafter, the problem was solved. Partway between the 85th and 86th parallel, Amundsen came to a colossus of a mountain range. He sat down with his men and planned how to find a way across.
Amundsen always spoke of we and ours. It was not his expedition, but ours. We were all companions and all had the same common goal.
When it came time to decide who would make the final journey to the pole, Scott decided to take 5 with him since pulling the sled was so difficult, even though he had only planned food rations and tents for 4.
Cooking for 5 takes a seriously longer time than cooking for 4, perhaps half an hour on the whole day. It is an item I had not considered when reorganizing.
Scott's team, still on level ground, became increasingly divided.
I dislike Scott intensely, and would chuck the whole thing if it were not that we are a British expedition and must beat the Norwegians. Scott is not straight. It is himself first, the rest nowhere.
At mile 102 from the South Pole, the Norwegian team passed the point at which all earlier explorers had turned back.
I heard a hearty cheer. The sun had just broken through in all its glory and illuminated in a lovely manner the beautiful little Norwegian flag. My goggles clouded over again, but this time it was not the south wind's fault. It was my own.
Scott's team was also full of anticipation.
If Amundsen gets there first, we shall come home with our tails between our legs, and no mistake. The excitement is great. Shall we see the English flag? God have mercy on us. I don't believe it.
8 miles from the pole, Amundsen's team moved him to the lead, as they had no wish to be the first to the pole. They felt that honor belonged to Amundsen. With the wind in his face, he heard his team cry out in chorus, "Halt!"
I had decided that we would all take part in the historic event, the act itself of planting the flag. It was not the privilege of one man. It was the privilege of all those who had risked their lives in the fight. It was the only way that I could show my companions my gratitude. 5 roughened, frost-bitten fists gripped the post, lifting the fluttering flag on high, and planted it together as the very first at the geographic South Pole.
Roald Amundsen not only led the Norwegian team in victory to the South Pole, he also led them safely back to base camp. The 1,866-mile journey took only an astounding 99 days. In the afternoon, Bowers spotted something ahead. Half an hour later, they realized it was a Norwegian flag tied to part of a sledge. Nearby were the remains of a camp.
This told us the whole story. The Norwegians have forestalled us and are first at the pole. Many thoughts have come and much discussion have we had. All the daydreams must go. It will be a wearisome return.
Weak from scurvy, Scott's return from the pole was fraught with disaster. Because of numerous delays, they passed the window of safety into the deadly Antarctic winter.